All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and in this video, we're going to talk about an exotic inlaid rifle sling. Now, you can build the same rifle sling and not put an exotic inlay in it if you choose, but we're doing a project box right now, the August 2026 project box, and we have made it to where it will be for an exotic inlay. Okay, now first and foremost, here is the template for this build. You've got your main body piece here, as well as the plug that came out of it right there. And then you've got the rest of your strap that would make up the bottom half of the sling, okay? Now, cutting these out is not really a huge problem. I cut them out of anywhere from 8 to 10 ounce leather. You can go a little bit heavier, but I wouldn't go any lighter than 8 ounce. Biggest thing I'll tell you is when you go to cut these two little corners right here, sure is easier to take a large hole punch and as opposed to trying to make that a rounded cut, punch a hole right there in those corners and then just cut up to that hole on both sides. So that's a big hint there. For the project box, we already have these cut out. Okay, so there's the main body with its plug. And then here is the secondary strap, the bottom part of the strap. There is a template for that bottom part of the strap as well. Here it is with all its holes marked and everything. But I'm going to set those aside for right now because I don't need them. I've got one already cut out. Also in the project box, we included an ostrich leg, okay? Ostrich legs are really great exotics because they're relatively inexpensive compared to something like alligator or elephant or something like that. And they're also perfect for some projects. One of them being an inlaid rifle sling. I mean, that's going to fit in there really nice, okay? They're perfect wallet back size. I've made watch bands out of them. I've made wrist cuffs out of them, stuff like that. And it's just that center section there with those scales is such a unique and fun exotic to use for things. Love these things. And like, again, they're not very expensive compared to a lot of other exotics. So without further ado, I'm going to put the camera down on the desk and we're going to talk about a few things before we get started and we go outside, and I'll airbrush this. I still haven't decided, but I'm really thinking, since this is a black cherry ostrich leg, it looks black, but it's got red undertones to it. I'm really thinking about dyeing this an oxblood color. I love the oxblood dye. It is just the greatest deep red, but not maroon. And it's just one of my favorites anyway. So we're going to talk about each of these pieces right quick, but then we're going to go dye some leather. So here we go. Okay, so again, we have our three pieces already cut out. If you don't want to make this with an exotic inlay, you just simply don't cut that plug out. And then you've got plenty of room there to tool or whatever else you might want to do. But we are going to do an inlay on this one. And we used a clicker well, I hand cut this one out, but we've got clicker dies for the project boxes coming. But we've got a little bit of prep work that we need to do before we start to do our dye work. And I guess actually it could be done afterward. But one of the things that we need to do is we need to skive the plug a little bit. And as a matter of fact, I even like to trim the plug just ever so slightly, because right now it just perfectly fits inside there. That's what it was cut out of. But if I trim just a 1/16 of an inch off each side of it, and then the top and the bottom, then that ostrich leg has room to fit between those two pieces of leather, because that plug is going to be underneath the ostrich leg, and that's what's going to really make it look nice. If you just put the leg under the leather like that, it looks kind of flat and boring, and then also as a rifle sling goes, it'll be very thin in that area. And I want this thing bulked up a little bit, okay? Because again, it's a rifle sling. I'm going to be putting this thing on a pretty expensive rifle, and I would really like for it to be substantial and hold it well. So again, I want to skive down the edges of this one and trim it just ever so slightly, all right? So I'm going to grab some tools, and that's what I'm going to do first. Okay, so again, I am trimming just a tiny, tiny bit off this thing. Not very much at all, because I just this ostrich leg is pretty thin, and but I still want to make some space for it between these two layers. All right, so use the template as a guide here, and just trim a tiny bit off. And technically, I guess we could just trim one side versus trimming both, but you know. As a matter of fact, this trim got a little bit wider than I wanted it to, so I'll hold it up there and see if I only want to do the one side. There we go. Okay. No, I'll go ahead and trim both sides, and that'll keep it more even also. So, turned it around. Now I'll trim the other side down a little bit. I think I need to snap part of my blade off this sucker. Shouldn't take 4 cuts to get through 9-10 ounce leather. All right, now I'm just going to trim off a little bit off this bottom end down here. Both sides. There we go. Okay, now, again, now I want to do a little bit of skiving on this, okay? Because if it's just squared off, then the ostrich leg won't look natural sitting under there. It'll kind of look like it was forced into it, I guess you could say. So I'm just going to take, and I'm just going to skive off a little bit. Okay, and I'm doing this actually off of the grain side. And that sure makes skiving easy when you can do it on the grain side. Oop, getting a little out of control there. Let's get back on the right side of the knife. Okay, and then I'll do the tip of it pretty good there. And then I'll start running up the other side here. Okay, and I'm doing this kind of hastily. You know, you might want to be a little bit more careful than I am to try to get it as even as you can. The good news is under that ostrich leg, you won't really be able to tell that I've gotten crazy here. I should just change hands so I can get the knife down at the level I need it. But it's also trying to curl up on me there. All right. There we go. A little bit more off this other side here. And then across the top here. Okay, and this is a real fancy head knife type knife, but I mean, the knife that I trimmed it with, I also could have done the skiving with. So if you don't have a fancy knife like this, it's okay. I personally, you know, a head knife is kind of like the traditional saddle making, leather working knife, and even though I've been doing this 20-something years, I hardly ever use a head knife. So I'm trying to force myself to practice with it a lot more often. Okay. All right, so that's it. That's skived now. Now what I need to do is I'm going to dye both pieces of my sling, and I'm going to do that with the airbrush. So we're going to go out to the warehouse and do that. So we'll be back. All right, so here I've got my Maker's Leather Supply cordless airbrush, and I'm going to start out with oxblood. And I think I'm going to do kind of a fade effect towards the edges. And I'm going to try dark chocolate to go to the darker color around the edges. I don't like using black dye. I've just never been a big fan of it. It's hard to manage. It's hard to get to blend well. Sometimes it likes to have more rub off than other dyes, stuff like that. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to go oxblood over the entire thing, and then I'm going to try to just hit the edges up with that dark chocolate. However, after that dye dries, if I don't like how it looks, I will go back with black and make it make it black in those areas, okay? Instead of the dark chocolate, okay? So I'll take my my dye here. I got my gloves on because I don't dare touch a bottle of dye without gloves on my hands. Now, a little thing about oxblood dye that most people don't know is that oxblood dye actually makes a beautiful pink. If you're ever looking for a great, vibrant pink, take the oxblood dye and cut it 50% with like alcohol, just, you know, isopropyl alcohol, and it will make some absolutely gorgeous pink dye. Okay? All right, so I hit that up, and yeah, so now I'm gonna, the entire thing in the oxblood, and again, look how pink it looks when it's only on there a little bit. We're gonna have to hit a couple of coats on it to make sure that it doesn't stay pink, because I'm not trying to make a pink rifle dye, or rifle sling. I'm trying to make an oxblood one. So once we get this sucker with a couple of coats, it'll start to darken up for us. We're really having to saturate it with this one. Like I said, it takes some build up for it not to look too light colored. I want it pretty dark. I'm just on a cart with a piece of paper wadded up under it. I should have done a better job of getting a flat surface available for me. Airbrush really is so easy to use, and it does such a great job of getting dye even, as opposed to, say, using a dauber or something like that. Almost at the color I want it. Another good bit of circles here, and we'll have it as dark as I like. I'm gonna give that piece a moment to settle and maybe dry, and I'll hit up this other piece. Now on this strap end here, I'm going to dye the back of it as well, but I'm just going to do it the darker color. I'm not going to do the fade job or anything like this. I'll just do the darker color on this piece, and that way the back of it's finished. The main body of the sling, since I'm doing the inlay, will actually be lined, so I don't need to do the back of it. Lots of dye. Now, caution, if you're doing a lot of airbrushing, it is very good practice to wear a respirator. I am in a very large room right now, so that helps. And then also, you wouldn't be able to hear me or understand me if I was wearing one. So I am doing without for now. These things have a ton of overspray, and it really is just better for your health if you wear some sort of a respirator type mask. Okay, we're going to let that dry for a minute while we put another coat back on the other. And I gotta watch out, I didn't get the insides. Matter of fact, let me turn that thing around. So I get the insides of my inlay cut out there and hit it from different angles here. Whew. Oxblood is a difficult dye to use because, again, you've really got to build your layers to get the depth and color that you're looking for, and the tone that you're looking for, to not just have it look red or pink. This thing to lay a little bit flatter here. All right. All right. I think we're done with the oxblood. Got a little bit left in here. I'm just going to pour it back into its container. Then I'll get out that dark color, dark chocolate. If I'm going light to dark, especially on colors that I'm going to blend and mix, I don't worry about cleaning out my airbrush in between. I just do it at the end. Oh, it's a brand new bottle, so I better shake it up good. You should always shake up your dyes. You'd be amazed how much of that pigment can settle in that bottle. And so if you don't shake it up, and here's another thing, when you open a bottle of Phoebing dye, the little foil cap comes off of it. Once you've broken the seal, still has a little bit of a rubbery right there. But you want to take that cap and put it, or that seal that you pulled off, and put it back in the cap, because that's what helps seal the jar or the bottle in between uses. So just a tidbit about that. All right. Here I am making a huge mess. Should have got one of those fancy little pouring caps like I had on the last one. Okay, spray out the red. Get to that dark chocolate there. Oh yeah. All right, now the dark chocolate dye, all I'm gonna do is hit the edges of this project up with it, okay? It can be a little bit more difficult on such a narrow strap, and honestly, if I screw it up terribly, I'll probably just dye the entire thing the dark chocolate color. But on the wider strap, it's gonna be a little bit easier. So here we go. I'm going slow because I want a nice, good, deep penetration on my first go. Okay, and I'm gonna set that one aside while I go to this one. And again, if I don't end up liking the dark chocolate, I'm just gonna go back over it with black. And instead of having dark chocolate burst effect, I'll have a black burst effect. Okay? I need to do a couple of layers of each of these just to get it nice and dark on those edges. When I'm done out here, I'm going to need to take my dark chocolate dye inside with me, because as I burnish edges, I'm going to use it to color my edges. All right, I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry. I'm going to see what I think. I may go back over it with black after it's dried. I don't know yet. I may even have to take it out in the sunlight just to see what it looks like with the ostrich leg itself as well. Either way, when we come back, the coloring part will be done, and we'll be back in there at the workbench. So we'll be back. Okay, I did not go back over it with black. I'm still not 100% sure if I'm in love with it, but we're gonna roll with it. I believe in my choice of colors. I think it's gonna work, especially after I do my darkened edges, and also put some Duff's Leather Care or something like that on it to just help blend it in a little bit more and get that dye to soak in a little bit better, okay? So let's hope I'm not making a terrible mistake and have to redo this entire video. All right, next step. I need to burnish the inside of my hole for my inlay, okay? And first I want to make it dark. So I'm going to take this dauber here, and I'm going to take a lighter to it, because right now that dauber is big and fuzzy, and if I put dye in it, then it's just going to make a huge mess in there. So I'm going to burn it way down to where it looks like a burnt marshmallow. Okay? See the marshmallow goodness? All right, and then I'll take it, and I'll try to do this. Yeah, you can't really see, but I'm going to take it over the trash can, and I'm just going to knock all that charring off, okay? Give it a couple of seconds, make sure it's not molten, but just knock the charring off. Super easy to do. And then, when you're done, you'll have a real nice little dauber, no loose fur and fuzz all over it. And I'm going to take it, put some dye on it, and I'm just going to run it around the inside of that hole. Okay? I didn't do it on camera, but I did remember to do it. But I did dye the backside of my small strap. I told you the big one doesn't need it, but the small one does. Okay? Now, this is where I break my rule about not touching dye without gloves. All right. So I'm going to take this dauber from the bottom side here, and I'm just going to run it around the inside of my plug hole, so that I can burnish it, and it'll be nice and dark. I don't want any of that like pinkish look to be seen by any means through that hole. Reload the dauber here. You may have to do this more than once, just depending on the colors you're using or whatever. Again, I'm just darkening that area up, so when I burnish it, it'll be nice and pretty. Okay. I'll set that dye and that dauber aside, because I will use them again later when I go to burnish all my edges. But for now, that's the pieces I need to burnish. All right. Now, if yours is die cut for the project box, you don't need to use like an edger or anything if you don't want to. The die actually does a pretty good job of leaving a rounded edge on the top side. You may want to run an edger around the bottom side. I failed to show that on camera, and I'm sorry. But before I dyed that, I did run an edger around the bottom side, and that way that as that inlay goes down and under that, it'll have a nice little rounded edge instead of trying to go a straight 90-degree turn, if that makes any sense. All right, so I'm going to grab my top secret burnishing solution here. Okay. I never, ever, ever talk about my top secret burnishing solution, which is 1/3 Elmer's glue and 2/3 water. Works amazingly with veg tan and actually a lot of other leathers as well. But you know, veg is pretty easy to burnish. Problem is, it also separates, so I gotta give it a little shaky shake, get some of that glue off the bottom of it, making a huge mess with it. It's an old bottle, it doesn't seal anymore, so I shouldn't have shaken it over my desk. It'll be all right. Okay, I'm going to take the dauber and I'm going to burnish the inside of that hole. Okay, so just like burnishing anything else, I'm going to put my solution in there. Then I'm going to take a canvas cloth and I'm going to rub it very briskly. Okay? And that'll really sharpen up the look of the inside of that inlay. Okay, if you leave your edges all rough and ugly, then people will see them even when the inlay's in there. So a little bit of burnish sure can go a long way to pretty this project up and make it nice. Okay, and it doesn't have to be all perfectly slicked, but you do want it dressed up nice. All right. There's one side, now I got to do it again. Don't want that on top of there. My dauber fell through, and yeah, got some of my burnishing solution on the front. Hopefully that won't show up in the end result. It's difficult to burnish. It's the inside of the hole, of course, and it's not very wide of a piece of leather. So while you want to apply pressure and get a good burnish, you want to go easy on it so it doesn't just flop out from under you. And then, as soon as I'm done burnishing this, I'm actually going to use my Duff's leather conditioner and go ahead and put a top coat on this thing just to make sure that the color turns out like I think it will. Okay. And you can use an oil or something like that as well. Some sort of conditioning oil works well. Mink oil works well. Honestly, straight up vegetable oil out of your kitchen works amazingly. So, yeah. All right, so I'm going to use my Duff's on this now, and I'll let that set for a little bit so that it kind of dries, I guess you could say, and then we'll see how that color turns out. But I bet it's going to do just the right trick to put it exactly where I want it. Okay, so this stuff is really great stuff. We do carry it at Makers, but it's quickly becoming one of my absolute favorite finishes for leather work. It just really kind of helps blend everything together, rejuvenates the leather after you've put a bunch of dye on it that's going to suck the moisture content out of your leather. Okay. So I just kind of slather it on with a piece of sheep's wool, and then I let it dry on there for a little bit after rubbing it in, and then I buff it off with a clean piece of sheep's wool. Okay. And yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the camera. We're going to wait a little bit. I'll clean up my desk where I got all this stuff all over my mat here. And then when we come back, I'll have already let that dry and then wiped it off. And we'll see how the color looks then. But so far, it's looking like it's going to be perfect. So we'll be back. All right, guys, I got lucky. That Duff's really did help blend all that, and honestly, I really love the combination of it now with the black cherry. So, a little bit of a risk brought lots of reward, okay? There was a movie I watched a long time ago. I don't remember what it was, but one of the quotes I got from it was, "Is the juice worth the squeeze?" And this time it was. All right, so now we need to start working on our inlay, okay? So what I'm going to do is just kind of move my sling, my open area here around on here and decide how I want it, okay? And I think this looks pretty good right here. I like where the scale, the big scale down the middle just kind of dissipates and goes down into tiny scales down here. It seems to fit really well, and hopefully I can get it exactly there when it's all said and done. So what I like to do is I'll take and put my finger right where I want the top of this, and then on the back of this thing I'll make a mark there. But first, it looks like I need to rip a sticker off, so should have done that a long time ago. It's the crazy thing about exports or imports and exotics, they all have to have that sticker on them to identify them. Anyway, let me remark this right quick. Let's go right there. And the good news is I can see those scales on the back of here, so I just need to kind of mark which one. As soon as I can get my pen open. All right, so there's the top of my inlay right there. Now, what I need to do is I need to put contact cement all over this and on the back of this. And then I just take and put this sucker down and make sure that it really centers itself on those scales. And I can see those scales from the back side, so it's gonna work out. All right, so I need to grab my contact cement and yeah. Okay, so I want to get contact cement all over the top and even the edges of this piece right here. Okay, and then I need to get it all over a nice wide strip of this to make sure that it's all gonna be covered. All right, I'm really reaching the bottom of my can of contact cement, and it's also getting pretty thick on me. So forgive me while it takes me a while to spread this stuff out. Okay, I want to get it all over that skive, and then again I'm going to turn it up on its side also and get it all over the edge. And that'll help me get a really good plug going on this thing. Okay, so turn it up on its side. And make sure I get this goo everywhere. Okay. And you can be real conservative with your ostrich leg and try to like save the areas that you're going to cut away so that maybe you could make a smaller project out of those. But I'm kind of making a mess all over mine with the glue, and so I didn't really think about that beforehand. I always suggest with my videos, like, watch the whole thing, because I'll come up with ideas of things I should have done better right smack in the middle. So watch the whole thing and then start your project. All right, and again, I'll get it up on the edge. All right, I'll set that piece aside because now I need to get contact cement all over the back of the leg. Okay. See if we can get a big old scoop out of here and just spread liberally. Sometimes it's nice when your glue's getting kind of thick, and sometimes it sure can work against you, especially like this isn't too bad, but if your leather has lots of fuzzy to it, then that glue gets real difficult to spread where you need it if you let it get thick. So yeah, I need to go over to the store and get me a new can. Okay. Now, I'm I'm going to take my plug. I'm going to put the top of it where that mark was, right in the middle of those big scales. And then as I lay it down, I want to make sure that it's centering on those big scales. Okay. Now, that glue's pretty gooey, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait about 10 minutes for it to dry a little bit better so that I can turn this over and do a good job of like kind of creasing my sides down along the side of my plug. So anyway, I'm going to pause the camera, and in a few minutes we'll come back and we'll continue on. All right, we're back. It's been a few minutes. Let that set up some. Now I'm going to turn it over. I did a pretty decent job of centering that. Okay. I don't want to glue it to my table, so again, I'm just being careful here. But I'm going to take and really secure that glue onto the top of that. And then I'm going to take a bone folder, and I'm going to run it along the edges and secure it to the sides of it as well. Okay. Now this isn't veg tan. I'm not molding. I'm just getting that glue to stick to that glue so that I can get it to be real pretty when it goes inside there. Okay. And this is why we get glue all along the sides and stuff of our plug, so that this works. All right, we got a pretty good mold of it there. Now I'm going to take and set my sling over it. Ooh, that's going to be pretty. I am not upset about how this is going to look. Okay. Now, a couple of different ways we can do this next part, okay? Contact cement is always like the roughest, toughest, best way to go with stuff. But you risk, kind of like how I don't use contact cement in a turn bag. I don't want to see any of it on my finished project. Okay, so we're going to go safe. And safe would be that I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape right along there and there, just on the inside, or just on the outside of that hole cutout. All right, and that is going to be what sticks these two together so that I can sew them right quick. And then the sewing is really going to hold them together well for me. All right. Now I do want to make sure that I don't accidentally put the tape where I can see it through the hole, because then that defeats the whole purpose of not using your contact cement. Okay, so now I'm going to lay it back up there again, and you have to watch out. Like, you can easily stretch these sides out, okay? So when you put this together, you want to try to make sure that those sides are as straight and nice as they can be. I've seen lots of guys have done inlays, and you can just see that big bulge coming out on the sides, and it just really detracts from the accuracy and the niceness of their entire project to have that. So be careful with it, okay? All right, I'm gonna just remove one piece of tape at a time whilst I hold the bottom of this down in that V where it needs to be. Oh, and it still moved on me. Dadgummit. That didn't work out. All right, so I'm just laying that edge right up against my plug there. Okay. Smash all that up. Now I'm going to take the tape off the other side. Now, I'm going to use a sewing machine on my project, okay? You do not have to have a sewing machine. You do not have to use a sewing machine, okay? This can very, very easily be hand stitched. However, it cannot quickly be hand stitched. And I would like to finish this video today, so I'm going to use my sewing machine. I do like to hand sew my smaller projects on my channel just because I don't want people to think they need a sewing machine to do what I do, okay? Plenty of folks don't own sewing machines that are doing amazing work. I didn't own one for a long time. They're expensive, okay? They're a heck of an investment for a hobbyist. So I get it. If you don't have one, don't feel bad. But what I'm going to do is go to that sewing machine. I'll bring the camera, but I'm just going to stitch around that inside perimeter right there, okay? I'm stitching on the veg tan, but very close to that cutout so that it stitches the ostrich leg to the surface layer here. And then when we're done with that, we'll trim the ostrich leg, we'll line the entire back of this piece, and then we will stitch around the edge of that. So when I come back, we'll be at the sewing machine. Okay, here we are at the sewing machine. I was a little concerned as what color of thread I wanted to use, but on this sewing machine, I already had threaded up a very pretty dark brown. It's size 92. I would use 92 or maybe 138 on this project. 138 if you like a heavier stitch, 92 if you like a lighter stitch. But yeah, 92 was already lined up on it. And we'll see how that looks. So I'm just going to do, again, the very edge of my center foot of my sewing machine is right up against the edge of that opening. And I'm just going to stitch all the way around it. We were sewing wallets on this machine last, so it's got some pretty small stitches set up on it. I probably should have made my stitch length a little longer. It'd be all right. When I do the perimeter stitch, though, I will bring my stitch length out just a little bit. Just 1 or 2 clicks, maybe. Yeah, this would be a real pretty stitch for this. I like the color. I like that I didn't give in to my inner thoughts and just put black on it. Again, I'm just not a fan. I mean, even when I was doing custom work for a living, people would come in and ask me for something dyed black, and I would try to talk them out of it, especially if they wanted me to tool it. That was my real pet peeve, is people that wanted some really awesome tooling and then just dye it black. Like, cool. I would absolutely love to just cover up all the hard work I did putting detail into this. So sometimes I'd just refuse the order if I couldn't talk them out of it. I just, you know, I mean, it's a sense of pride with my work that I want it to have more character than just dye it black. All right, sewing around the top here. And again, currently that plug is only held in there by glue. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're talking about contact cement. It's not going anywhere, but you do just have to be careful with that as you're folding it up to get it to twist under the machine. right, a couple of over stitches and to seal off our stitch here. And I'll show it to the camera right quick, but I'm pretty happy with it. There it is right there. All right, back to the desk. We're gonna trim off the ostrich leg, apply our lining, and then come back to the sewing machine and do a whole perimeter stitch around this leg. Here we go. Okay, now it is time to trim the back of that ostrich leg. Okay, a lot of different ways we can do this, but I do like to also show different ways to do such a thing. And one of those ways would be with like a French edger. You could just use a knife. You could use your skiving knife. I mean, there are a bunch of ways, seriously. But I'm going to use a French edger today. Let's see how this one's acting. It's a size number 6, but honestly, it could be almost any size. It's a Ron's edger. Let's drop it up. Who knows when I used it last, or if I've ever even used it before. Who knows? So what I'm going to do, though, is grab me a pair of scissors, and I'm going to use those scissors first to just start my cut in here. I know I saw a pair of scissors laying around here. There they are. All right, just to start my cut, okay? And then I'm going to take my cut down here close to my stitches. And then I'm going to take my edger here, and I'm just going to run it along the leather, right up along, close to those stitches. I know my hand's kind of in the way, but I also have to pull on that leather while I do it. Okay. And I'm just running this little edger along. See if I can find a different angle. Maybe if I switch hands. This is where being a little ambidextrous helps out. Okay. Whoop. Maybe not so much. Ambahoo. Get that cut started again here. Hang on. And when I'm not trying to show it to the camera, this would already be done. It goes real quick and easy, very even against your stitches. You just the hard part is just make sure you don't accidentally cut your stitches. Okay, so there's one side, and we'll come around here and do the other side. Right up on one of those scales or something that's not wanting to. There we go. I'm gonna try to switch hands again. We'll see. I really do want you to be able to see, but I also don't want to screw up. Welcome to my world. So anyway, if you use the French edger, it's kind of nice because it can help to kind of skive it as well. And then you may not have to do any prep work before you put your liner on. Because the biggest thing you don't want to do is take your knife and just cut down against that. One, you risk weakening your veg tan underneath it. And then two, then it's just got like a 90-degree cut on it, and it doesn't have any kind of a skive or transition from ostrich leg to nothing. Come on now. All right. Whew. Now, the good news is, look how nice and clean that looks now, huh? Now we're getting somewhere. So, I've got my liner. This is just a split suede. Now, let's talk about lining a rifle sling, guys. They sure do look pretty when you just got smooth veg tan on the inside, but they also want to slide off your shoulder constantly when you're carrying the weapon or whatever you mount the sling to. I mean, it is made to be a rifle sling, but maybe you put it on your French horn. I don't know. All right, but I need to, first thing I'm going to do is just kind of rough cut my, my lining piece here. just so I can get most of this off my table. Okay, and again, this is just a split suede. It's nothing fancy, but since it's a split suede or a suede at all, or you could just use rough out veg tan, it's gonna stick to my shoulder when I'm carrying this thing, all right? Again, a slick back on your rifle sling means you're constantly pulling your daggum rifle back up over your shoulder, and it's a real pain in the butt. You might as well just carry it in your hands. Now, couple of things. When I put this bottom part on here, I want it to go in between the liner and the main body of the sling, just for aesthetics. Then, and also you don't have like a ridge there on the outside to hang up on things. Okay, so when I glue my liner, I'm going to stop gluing it about here, and then from there down, I might just put a tiny dab of glue just along the very edges. But I want to leave that area with no glue, with no contact cement, because I don't want to glue it shut that I can't get that piece in between those two after I've sewn them together. Okay. Also, on this end, I'm going to end up cutting my liner just straight across from point to point up here. All right, I don't need my liner to be part of my fold over and everything. It'll actually make it more difficult to fold over and put my Chicago screw in there when I go to mount this to my rifle. Okay, so I'm going to keep both of those things in mind whilst I put glue on this thing. All right. So the first thing I'll do is set this down on top of this. And you can look at your suede and decide, you know, which side might make a better, prettier, you know, make sure there's no marks or something on it. It's a pretty ugly suede, honestly. It's just a plain gray is what I mean by ugly. I mean, it's fine. It's going to work great for this application, but it's not a suede that I would make a nice belt with a gunslinger stitch line or something crazy like that out of. That's what I mean when I say ugly. All right, and I'm just tracing my my sling on it, so I'll have some general guidelines about where to put glue, so I don't have to just glue the entire liner, you know, and spread glue all over it. Waste glue, waste time, waste all kinds. All right, so now I'm not going to talk while I do it, but I'm going to put glue from there to just before those holes right there. Okay. I'm not going to talk while I do it so that I can speed the camera up and you don't have to watch me for 5 minutes spreading glue. Okay, and then once I'm done with that, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the liner piece itself. So all you're going to see is the world's fastest gluer going to town on this. Okay, got the glue nice and spread on there. Now, I'm just going to take one, set it on top of the other. Okay. Spread the love there, spread everything out nicely. On the back side, I'm going to take my hammer, and especially where that plug is, really flatten that out. All right. Now, I need to carefully trim this part just right across here. And it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. I'm actually just going to use some scissors to do it so that I can go and sew this thing, because I don't want to accidentally sew that down if I'm going to trim that. That's good enough, because what's going to happen is that'll fold over that and nobody will ever see it. Okay? So, what I'm going to sew is I am going to start down here, and I'm going to lay those flat on top of each other, and I'll start on one side and I'll sew up, and I'll back stitch down here. Okay? I'll sew up all the way around the tip of this, down the other side, and when I get down to the bottom part, I will back stitch again, leaving that entire bottom area open so that, again, I can shove that other piece up under it here in a little bit. Okay? So, back to the sewing machine we go. Here we go. Okay, so here I am back at the sewing machine. I did adjust my stitch length out just a little bit, because again, it was making some pretty small stitches in there. I do have enough bobbin thread to do what I need to do here. Okay, now, again, I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'll back stitch, and go all the way to the very edge down there, and then I will go up all the way around the very tip of this thing on the other end, and then come back down the other side. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Get it all in position, hold my reverse lever down, throw some back stitches on there. Ooh, may have gone too wild with my stitch length here. There we go. That's a good length. I like to keep my stitches on something like this around 7 or 8 per inch. All right, we're just stitching and stitching. Everything looks good, so I'm going to keep going. And again, this can easily be hand sewn, folks. I'm using a sewing machine because it's faster and because, dang it, I have a lot of money invested in sewing machines. All right, coming up to this corner, so I'm going to go nice and slow around the corner. And I make all of my turning motions while the needle's down in the leather, and it'll help me stay consistent going around the corner. Now we got a corner going the other way. There we go. Now we're going to go up and around the tip. And down the other side we go. Easy peasy. And once we're done stitching this, we're going to go back to the table and we're going to trim the liner, and we're going to sand and burnish this entire piece. And we're going to burnish the bottom end of the strap. And then we're going to connect the two. I mean, we're 80% done already. Just a lot of burnishing here. Okay, now back down the other side. Now keep in mind the bottom part of your strap, you could also stitch all the way around it if you wanted to. I personally don't care to, but it can be done. All right, this bad boy is stitched together. So we are already done sewing with this entire project. I can turn my machine off. We're going to go back to the table and trim our liner off. Here we go. Okay, back at the bench. I'm going to use a rotary cutter because it'll just trim that liner right up against my veg tan. When I go around a corner with a rotary cutter, I'll show you what I do is I go back and forth and just work my way around that corner, and it kind of shreds the leather, but it's the leather that's not attached to the project, so that's okay. That's what I'm trimming off. Okay, now I need to get another kind of knife and trim off where the rounded area is there, because that's hard to do with a rotary cutter. A rotary cutter likes to go more straight. Break me off a fresh blade so it'll cut nicely. All right, get the blade off here so I don't screw up my hand on that. I'm excited, guys. This is going to be great. Okay, now again, the next thing I need to do is use an edger around the entire outside, and then I'm going to dye those edges, and then I'm going to burnish those edges. So here I go. It's a Ron's Edger number 2. And I'm going to burnish these edges in the same manner that I burnished edges before, so I don't even feel like I need to make you watch me do it. Okay, and if you've got some rough spots or glue on your edges or anything, you may want to try to sand that off a little bit just to make your burnishing job a little bit easier on yourself, okay? Because burnishing can be a difficult enough task without having to add multipliers in there like glue and stuff like that. Okay. All right, so again, I'm going to take and dye these edges very carefully. Okay, this suede split is not going to edge very well, but it'll burnish just fine. Using my glue mixture at least. I don't know what kind of burnishing compound you may have that you're using, but with the glue mixture, it'll do fine. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to dye these edges and I'm going to burnish them. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with this piece. Okay, I will edge it, I will dye my edges, I will burnish my edges. When we come back, we'll attach the top part to the bottom part. Okay? Be right back. All right, all my edges are burnished and this thing's looking great. Okay, so now I need to take this end and insert it into this, line up my holes. Well, first, actually, I need to punch those holes through the liner. Okay, totally forgot about that part. Let me grab some stuff. I'll be right back. All right, grab me a little hole punch. There we go. Now we're good. So again, we're just going to insert that into there and line up our holes and set a couple of rivets. Okay, now you may have to work something more rigid in there first to get it to stretch how you need it to. Matter of fact, use this pair of scissors here and just kind of stretch that out a little bit. Yar. There we go. All right. Just like it should be. Okay. Take a couple of rivets, put in those holes. Now, I like making slings this way as opposed to one solid, long taper piece of leather for several reasons. One, you can get a better yield out of your leather cutting them out this way, because you don't have to have one long, solid piece going all the way down the entire thing. So yeah, you can get a better yield out of them. You can, it also is a little bit easier to cut them out if you're not trying to do that long taper that then goes straight down here and everything. It's very hard to get that consistent and nice looking when you're doing that entire thing all at once. All right. Now, what I didn't realize is when I grabbed my rivets, I grabbed a couple that I actually pre-polished a long time ago. But you know what? I'm going to use them. So they'll just be pretty. Sometimes I'll take rivets and I'll put them in my rivet setter and I'll hold them up to my buffing wheel and polish them like that. And it sure does make them nice and shiny and pretty. I usually reserve that for super high-end bags and stuff like that, though. Normally I don't put it on rifle slings. All right, so I'm setting my rivets now. I use my first setter to push my washer down. Use my cutters here to cut them off about 1/8 of an inch or so, maybe a little less. And then I go back with my peen hammer. And peen them down. Then I usually come back with setter number 2, which has a small dome to it. Okay, and I'll hit that on there with my mallet, and what it'll do is try to fold any burrs back that I created when I peened it. Okay, and now when I run my finger over it, I always like to say if it doesn't catch your fingerprint when you're running your finger over it, then it's probably not going to snag your clothing and stuff like that. Okay, now we're done. This sucker is completed. Okay, to install it, we would need to, I've got one more hole to punch right there. Because once again, I got to punch it through my liner. All right, so we'll take our Chicago screws and install them. But you would put your top hook of your sling right there and get these suckers screwed on. Let me get this sucker on here. Let me get a screwdriver. So anyway, Chicago screws can be a little bit of a bear to get to screw in straight. If I struggle with them too much, I'm going to go off camera and screw these things on and then come back. And sure enough, I'm having a good time with it. So anyway, that's going to go over your top hook of your rifle. And then the bottom one there is going to go onto the bottom hook of your rifle. And then you basically just attach it back to whatever hole is most comfortable to make it fit your firearm and your shoulder. Okay? So there it is. Whew. Heck of a day. All right, guys, so that's it. That's how you build a rifle sling. Hoping you enjoyed it. Hoping you had some fun with it. Hope you had a great project. Mostly, I just really hope you had fun with it, man. I love leatherwork, and I love sharing leatherwork, and I hope other people love it as much as I do. So until next time, I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and I hope you have a great day.